In a small, quiet town surrounded by endless fields of corn and rolling hills, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, mom-and-pop shops, and the occasional diner where locals gathered to share stories, over coffee. Among these familiar landmarks stood a gas station that served as both a pit stop for travelers and a lifeline for residents running late-night errands. It wasn't much to look at, a simple brick building with faded signs advertising fuel prices and snacks, but it was an essential part of the community. Jason had worked at this gas station for nearly 3 years. At 25, he was still figuring out what he wanted from life. He wasn't sure how he'd ended up here, but the job paid just enough to cover his rent and keep food on the table. Nights at the station were usually slow, giving him plenty of time to think, or sometimes to dream about something better. Maybe one day he'd open his own business or travel somewhere far away from the monotony of this sleepy little town. But for now, he spent most of his shifts stacking chips on shelves, mopping floors, and helping the occasional customer who wandered in. Tonight, however, felt different. The air seemed heavier somehow, charged with an energy Jason couldn't quite explain. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees and the hum of crickets filled the silence. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a pale glow over the rows of candy bars and soda bottles. Jason leaned against the counter, absent-mindedly wiping down the surface with a rag. His mind drifted to thoughts of his childhood, growing up in this same town, and wondering if he'd ever break free from its hold. Just as Jason began to lose himself in these musings, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the arrival of a customer. He glanced up and saw a young woman step inside, her face pale and drawn. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. 2 small children clung to her sides, their wide eyes scanning the store curiously. One of them, a boy no older than 4, tugged at her sleeve and pointed toward the toy aisle, but she gently shook her head and guided them toward the checkout counter instead. Sarah, though Jason wouldn't learn her name until later, was carrying only a few items. Loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a box of cereal. Simple necessities, nothing fancy. As she placed the items on the counter, Jason noticed her hands trembling slightly. She fumbled with her wallet, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills and loose change. Counting carefully, she arranged the money into neat piles, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she finally looked up, there was a flicker of panic in her eyes. I'm short, she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I had enough, but... Her words trailed off, and she bit her lip nervously. Jason studied her for a moment, taking in the dark circles under her eyes and the way her clothes hung loosely on her thin frame. It didn't take a genius to see that she was struggling. It's okay, Jason said gently, trying to put her at ease. How much are you short? $15, she replied, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I know it's not a lot, but... She hesitated, then added, Things have been tough lately. My husband left us a few months ago and I've been doing my best to make ends meet, but... Her voice cracked and tears welled up in her eyes. She quickly blinked them away, not wanting to cry in front of her children. Jason felt a pang of sympathy. He'd grown up in a household where money was always tight, so he understood what it meant to scrape by. Watching Sarah struggle to hold herself together tugged at something deep inside him. Without thinking too hard about it, he made a decision. Don't worry about it, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Take the groceries. You don't owe me anything. Sarah stared at him, stunned. Are you sure? I can come back tomorrow and pay you, I promise. No need, Jason assured her with a small smile. You've got your hands full already. Just take care of those kids, all right? For a moment, Sarah simply stood there, unsure of what to say. Then, relief washed over her face, and she nodded, gratefully. Thank you, she murmured, clutching the bag of groceries tightly. I'll never forget this. As she turned to leave, Jason watched her go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. On one hand, he knew he'd done the right thing. Helping someone in need felt good. It reminded him that even in the darkest moments there was still room for kindness. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the nagging thought that his boss might not see it the same way. Company policy was clear. Every sale had to be accounted for, no exceptions. If Mr. Grayson found out, Jason could be in serious trouble. Still, as the door swung shut behind Sarah and her children, Jason pushed those worries aside. For now, all that mattered was knowing he'd made a difference, however small. Little did he know, this act of compassion would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The night dragged on after Sarah left, and Jason tried to focus on his usual tasks, restocking shelves, cleaning spills, and checking the security cameras. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind kept circling back to what had just happened. He replayed the scene in his head over and over again. Sarah's trembling hands, her tear-filled eyes, and the way she had looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and relief. It made him feel good to know he'd helped someone who was clearly struggling, but the gnawing worry about his boss wouldn't leave him alone. Jason knew Mr. Grayson wasn't the kind of person to overlook something like this. The manager ran the gas station with an iron fist, always stressing rules, policies, and profit margins. To him, every penny counted, and bending the rules, even for a good reason, was completely unacceptable. Jason had seen it before when another employee got chewed out for giving a discount to a regular customer. That incident had ended with a formal warning and a lecture about company integrity. So, as much as Jason wanted to believe everything would be fine, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. Sure enough, less than an hour later, the bell above the door jingled again. This time it wasn't a customer walking in. It was Mr. Grayson. Tall, stern, and impeccably dressed in a pressed suit despite the late hour, he strode into the store with an air of authority that instantly put Jason on edge. In one hand he held a clipboard, in the other a stack of receipts. His sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on Jason almost immediately. "Where are the logs?" Mr. Grayson demanded without preamble, his voice clipped and cold. Jason blinked, caught off guard. "What logs?" "The transaction logs," Mr. Grayson snapped, tapping the clipboard impatiently. "I've been reviewing tonight's sales and there's a discrepancy. $15 missing from your register." Jason's stomach sank. He had hoped to avoid this moment altogether, but now there was no escaping it. Taking a deep breath, he decided to come clean. "Yeah, about that," he began hesitantly. "A woman came in earlier. She was short on cash. She needed food for her kids, so I let her take it without paying the full amount." For a split second, Mr. Grayson just stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then slowly his face turned red with anger. "You what?" he barked, his voice rising sharply. "Do you have any idea how serious this is? We don't run a charity here, Jason. Every dollar counts." "I know," Jason replied quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "But," she was really struggling. "Her husband left her, she's raising 2 kids on her own, and she didn't have enough money for groceries. What was I supposed to do, turn her away?" "Yes," Mr. Grayson shot back, slamming the clipboard onto the counter. The sound echoed through the otherwise quiet store, making Jason flinch. "That's exactly what you're supposed to do. You follow protocol, or you don't work here. It's that simple." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Grayson cut him off before he could say anything. "Listen to me carefully," the manager said, his tone icy. "This isn't about being nice or doing the right thing. This is about responsibility. When you signed up for this job, you agreed to follow the rules. And letting someone walk out without paying? That's not following the rules. That's theft." "It's not theft," Jason protested, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's $15. Are you seriously telling me that $15 is worth more than helping someone feed their kids?" "That's not the point," Mr. Grayson shouted, his patience clearly wearing thin. "The point is that you went against company policy. If I let you get away with this, what message does that send to everyone else? That they can do whatever they want? That the rules don't matter?" Jason clenched his fists, biting back the urge to yell. He knew arguing further wouldn't help, but it was hard to stay calm when he felt like he was being punished for doing the right thing. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. "Fine. If that's how you see it, then okay. But I stand by what I did. Mr. Grayson glared at him for a long moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Without a word, he slapped it onto the counter in front of Jason. It was a termination letter, official and impersonal, stating that Jason's employment was being terminated effective immediately due to misconduct. "You're fired," Mr. Grayson said flatly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Clock out, gather your things, and leave. I'll expect the uniform returned by tomorrow morning." Stunned, Jason stared at the letter as if it might disappear if he blinked enough times. He hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly, or at all. Sure, he'd known there was a risk, but he never imagined losing his job over something so small. A wave of emotions washed over him. Anger, disbelief, embarrassment. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a few co-workers peeking out from the storage room, their faces etched with awkward sympathy. No one dared to speak up, though. Everyone knew better than to cross Mr. Grayson. Without another word, Jason grabbed his backpack from behind the counter and started packing his personal belongings. Each item felt heavier than it should have: the water bottle, the granola bar, the pen he used to jot down notes during his shift. As he zipped up the bag, he glanced around the store one last time, taking in the familiar sights and smells. For 3 years, this place had been his second home. Now it felt foreign, unwelcoming. When he finally stepped outside, the cool night air hit him like a slap in the face. The parking lot was empty except for his old car, parked under a flickering street lamp. He stood there for a moment, staring at the ground, unsure of what to do next. The weight of what had just happened settled heavily on his shoulders. He'd lost his job not because he'd done something wrong, but because he'd tried to help someone. It didn't seem fair. As Jason leaned against his car, trying to process everything, headlights suddenly appeared in the distance. At first, he thought it was just another customer pulling in for gas, but as the vehicle drew closer, he realized it wasn't a typical car. It was sleek, black, and gleaming under the dim light. A Rolls-Royce. The luxury sedan rolled smoothly into the parking lot, its engine purring softly as it came to a stop near the pumps. Jason watched curiously as the driver's door opened, revealing a well-dressed man in his late 40s. Dressed in a tailored suit and polished shoes, the man exuded confidence and wealth. Yet, there was something approachable about him, a warmth in his demeanor that made him seem less intimidating than his surroundings might suggest. The man glanced toward the gas station, his gaze lingering on Jason for a moment before he approached. With each step, Jason felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Who was this guy, and why was he here? Little did Jason know this chance encounter would change everything. The man in the tailored suit walked toward Jason with an easy confidence, his polished shoes clicking softly against the pavement. Under the dim glow of the street lamp, his presence seemed almost surreal, a stark contrast to the dingy gas station and the quiet, unassuming town around them. For a moment, Jason wondered if he was dreaming. After everything that had happened tonight, Sarah's desperate plea, Mr. Grayson's harsh words, the crushing blow of losing his job, it felt surreal to see someone like this show up out of nowhere. "Hi there," the man said warmly, extending a hand as he approached. "I'm Richard Langley." Jason hesitated for a second before shaking the offered hand. Richard's grip was firm but not overbearing, and his smile was genuine, putting Jason slightly at ease. Still, confusion lingered in the back of his mind. What could someone like Richard possibly want with him? Hi, Jason replied cautiously. "I'm Jason. Can I help you with something?" Richard nodded, glancing briefly at the gas station behind them before turning his attention back to Jason. "Actually, yes. I wanted to talk to you about something, or rather, someone." He paused, studying Jason's face intently. "A young woman named Sarah. Does that name ring a bell?" Jason's heart skipped a beat. How did this man know about Sarah? And why was he asking about her now? Slowly, Jason nodded. "Yeah. She came in earlier tonight. She was short on cash for groceries, so I let her take what she needed without paying the full amount." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. You did? That must have been quite a risk on your part. It wasn't a big deal, Jason muttered, shrugging awkwardly. She was really struggling, I couldn't just turn her away. But it was a big deal, Richard countered gently. Not everyone would have made that choice. In fact, most people probably wouldn't have. Which is why I'm here. Now, Jason was thoroughly confused. Wait, how do you even know about Sarah and why does it matter to you? Richard chuckled softly as if amused by Jason's bewilderment. Let me explain. About an hour ago, I stopped at a diner down the road for coffee. While I was there, I overheard Sarah talking to another customer. She was telling them about what happened here tonight, how you helped her when she didn't have enough money for groceries. She couldn't stop praising you, saying you were kind and compassionate at a time when she needed it most. Jason blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected Sarah to share the story with anyone. Sure, she'd thanked him profusely before leaving, but he assumed that was the end of it. The idea that she'd gone out of her way to tell others about his small act of kindness left him feeling both humbled and uneasy. So, Jason began slowly, still unsure where this conversation was headed. You drove all the way here just to ask me about that? Not exactly, Richard admitted with a small smile. I came because I wanted to meet the person who made such a selfless decision. You see, I've spent my life building businesses and working with all kinds of people. Over the years, I've learned one thing. Character matters more than anything else. Skills can be taught, knowledge can be acquired, but integrity, that's something you either have or you don't. And based on what Sarah told me, I think you have it in spades. Jason shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of his neck. Compliments weren't something he was used to receiving, especially not from someone like Richard. Look, I appreciate the kind words, but I'm not sure what you're getting at. I mean, I just lost my job because of what I did for Sarah. If you're looking for some kind of hero, you've got the wrong guy. Richard's expression softened, and he tilted his head thoughtfully. Tell me about that. What happened after Sarah left? With a heavy sigh, Jason recounted the events of the past hour, the heated argument with Mr. Grayson, the termination letter, and the humiliating exit. From the gas station, as he spoke, Richard listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When Jason finished, Richard let out a low whistle. That's rough, he said simply. But honestly, it doesn't surprise me. People like Mr. Grayson, they don't understand the value of empathy. To them, rules are absolute, no matter the circumstances. But sometimes breaking the rules is the right thing to do. And from where I'm standing, you did exactly that. Jason shrugged, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to believe Richard's words, but the sting of being fired still lingered. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that I'm out of a job now. Thanks for stopping by, though. It means a lot. Richard studied him for a moment, then smiled knowingly. What if I told you I might be able to help with that? Jason frowned, skepticism creeping into his voice. Help how? Well, Richard started, leaning casually against the hood of the Rolls-Royce. As I mentioned earlier, I own several businesses. One of them happens to be a chain of convenience stores, not too different from this place actually. We're always looking for good people to join the team, especially those with strong values and leadership potential. And based on what I've heard and seen, I think you'd be a great fit. Jason stared at him, stunned. Was this really happening? A few hours ago, he'd been fired and feeling like his world was falling apart. Now, here was a wealthy businessman offering him a chance to start over. It sounded too good to be true. You're serious? Jason asked finally, his voice tinged with disbelief. Dead serious, Richard replied with a grin. Of course, it wouldn't just be handing you a job. There'd be training involved and you'd have responsibilities. But if you're willing to put in the work, I think you could go far. What do you say? For a moment, Jason didn't answer. His mind raced with questions and doubts. Could he trust Richard? Was this some kind of trick? But deep down, he knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. If nothing else, it was worth hearing him out. All right, Jason said finally, a spark of hope igniting within him. Let's talk more about it. Richard clapped his hands together, clearly pleased. Great. Why don't we sit inside the car? It's a bit chilly out here, and I'd love to hear more about your story. As they climbed into the luxurious interior of the Rolls-Royce, Jason couldn't help but marvel at the turn his night had taken. Just hours ago, he'd been certain his life was spiraling downward. Now, sitting across from Richard in this opulent vehicle, he dared to imagine a future brighter than anything he'd ever dreamed of. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The inside of the Rolls-Royce was unlike anything Jason had ever experienced. The leather seats were buttery soft, and the faint scent of polished wood and fresh linen filled the air. Soft, ambient lighting illuminated the interior, casting a warm glow that made the car feel more like a cozy lounge than a vehicle. As Jason settled into the passenger seat, he couldn't help but marvel at the contrast between this luxurious space and the cramped, fluorescent-lit gas station where he'd spent so many hours of his life. Richard sat behind the wheel, his demeanor relaxed yet focused. He turned slightly in his seat to face Jason, his expression open and inviting. "So," Richard began, his tone conversational, "tell me about yourself. What's your story?" Jason hesitated for a moment, unsure where to start. His life wasn't exactly exciting. It was just a series of ordinary days strung together. But as he looked into Richard's patient eyes, he realized this might be his chance to share the things he rarely talked about with anyone else. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "I grew up here in this town," Jason said slowly, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "It's not much, but it's home. My parents worked hard, my dad was a mechanic, and my mom cleaned houses, but money was always tight. I remember times when we had to skip meals or stretch leftovers for days because there wasn't enough to go around. Still, they did their best to give me and my sister a good life." He paused, glancing out the window at the darkened streets. The town looked peaceful at night, almost magical under the dim glow of streetlights. But Jason knew its quiet charm hid struggles that many outsiders wouldn't understand. "After high school, I thought about leaving," he continued. "Maybe going to college or finding work somewhere bigger, you know. But things didn't work out that way. Bills piled up, and I ended up taking whatever jobs I could find to help out at home. That's how I landed at the gas station. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills." Richard nodded thoughtfully, listening without interrupting. When Jason fell silent, Richard leaned forward slightly. "And what about now? Do you still want to leave? Or has staying here changed how you see things?" Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels stuck, like I'm never going to break free from this place. But another part of me thinks maybe it's not about the town. It's about what I make of my life while I'm here. Does that make sense?" "Perfectly," Richard replied with a small smile. "You're not alone in feeling that way. A lot of people get caught in the trap of thinking they need to escape their circumstances to find success. But sometimes, opportunity comes knocking right where you are. You just have to be ready to answer the door." Jason chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I guess tonight proved that, huh? One minute I'm getting fired, and the next I'm sitting in a Rolls-Royce talking about my future." Richard laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Life has a funny way of surprising us when we least expect it. But let's talk about that future. Like I mentioned earlier, I own a chain of convenience stores called Langley Markets. They're spread across several states, and we pride ourselves on being community-focused. We don't just sell snacks and gas, we aim to be a resource for the neighborhoods we serve." Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Community-focused? What does that mean exactly?" "It means we care about the people who walk through our doors," Richard explained. "Sure, we're a business and profitability matters, but we also believe in giving back. For example, some of our locations have programs to help struggling families during tough times. Others partner with local charities or host job fairs to support employment efforts. We try to make a positive impact wherever we can." As Richard spoke, Jason felt a spark of excitement ignite within him. This was so different from the rigid, profit-driven environment he'd endured at the gas station. The idea of working for a company that valued compassion and connection resonated deeply with him. That sounds amazing, Jason admitted. But why me? I've never managed anything before. I barely even finished high school. Richard waved a dismissive hand. Education is important, sure, but it's not everything. What matters most is how you treat people and whether you're willing to learn. From what I've seen tonight, and from what Sarah told me, you already have the qualities we look for in a leader: empathy, integrity, and a willingness to take risks for the greater good. Jason blinked, stunned by the compliment. No one had ever described him as a leader before. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Could he really step into such a role? I won't lie to you, Richard added, his tone turning serious. This won't be easy. Managing a store comes with challenges, long hours, difficult decisions, and plenty of responsibility. But if you're up for it, I'll make sure you have all the tools and support you need to succeed. Think of it as an investment, not just in you, but in the communities we serve. For a long moment, Jason sat in silence, weighing his options. On one hand, this offer seemed too good to pass up, a chance to rebuild his life and prove himself in ways he'd never imagined. On the other hand, fear crept in. What if he failed? What if he disappointed Richard and everyone else counting on him? Finally, he took a deep breath and met Richard's gaze. All right, he said firmly, determination steadying his voice. Render. Jason's decision to accept Richard's offer marked the beginning of a journey that would test his limits, reshape his perspective, and ultimately transform him in ways he never anticipated. Over the next few months, he threw himself into his new role with a level of dedication he didn't know he was capable of. Under Richard's guidance, Jason learned the ins and outs of running a convenience store, from managing inventory and handling finances to training employees and ensuring customer satisfaction. It was challenging work, but for the first time in years, Jason felt like he had a purpose. Richard kept his promise, providing Jason with all the resources he needed to succeed. He arranged for Jason to attend workshops on leadership and business management, introduced him to other store managers who shared their experiences, and checked in regularly to offer advice and encouragement. At first, Jason doubted whether he could live up to such high expectations, but Richard's belief in him proved contagious. Slowly, Jason began to trust himself and his ability to lead. One of the first things Jason did as manager of his assigned Langley Markets location was implement policies inspired by the kindness he'd shown Sarah that fateful night. He created a community support fund, pooling a small percentage of the store's profits to assist customers facing financial hardship. If someone came in unable to afford essentials like bread, milk, or diapers, they could apply for assistance through the fund. The program wasn't widely advertised. Jason preferred to keep it low-key, but word spread quickly among locals, earning the store a reputation as a compassionate and trustworthy establishment. The impact was immediate and profound. Families, struggling to make ends meet, found solace in knowing they had somewhere to turn when times got tough. Elderly residents praised the store for its generosity, while young parents expressed gratitude for the lifeline it provided during lean months. Even teenagers working part-time jobs at the store noticed the difference. They felt proud to be part of a team that prioritized humanity over profit. But not everyone was thrilled about these changes. Some corporate executives within the Langley Markets chain questioned whether Jason's initiatives were sustainable. They argued that giving away free products, even in small amounts, could hurt the company's bottom line. Others worried that the community support fund might attract freeloaders or create logistical headaches. When rumors of these criticisms reached Jason, he braced himself for a confrontation, fearing his dream job might slip away just as quickly as it had begun. To his surprise, Richard stood firmly by his side. During a tense board meeting where Jason's decisions were called into question, Richard defended him passionately. "We're not just selling goods here," Richard told the room. "We're building relationships. Yes, we need to be profitable, but our success is tied directly to the well-being of the communities we serve. If we abandon them in their time of need, we lose more than money. We lose trust, and trust is priceless." His words silenced the skeptics, at least temporarily. More importantly, They reinforced Jason's resolve to stay true to his values. With Richard's backing, Jason continued expanding the community support fund and exploring new ways to give back. He partnered with local food banks to host donation drives, organized free workshops on budgeting and financial literacy, and even set up a bulletin board in the store where residents could post job openings, housing opportunities, or requests for help. Each initiative strengthened the bond between the store and the community, turning it into more than just a place to buy snacks. It became a hub of connection and support. As the months passed, Jason noticed subtle shifts in his own life as well. For starters, he no longer dreaded waking up in the morning. Instead of dreading another monotonous shift at the gas station, he looked forward to tackling the day's challenges and finding creative solutions to problems. His confidence grew with each milestone he achieved, from successfully resolving a supply chain issue to receiving heartfelt thank you notes from grateful customers. He also developed a newfound appreciation for teamwork, realizing that leadership wasn't about doing everything yourself. It was about empowering others to do their best. Perhaps the most surprising change, however, was how Jason's relationships improved. Before taking the job at Langley Markets, he'd often felt isolated, unsure of how to connect with people beyond surface-level conversations. Now, he found himself engaging deeply with employees, customers, and neighbors alike. Whether it was mentoring a shy teenager, learning the ropes of retail, or chatting with an elderly regular about her grandchildren, Jason discovered joy in listening to others' stories and offering whatever support he could. One evening, as Jason locked up the store after a particularly busy day, he reflected on how far he'd come. Just a year ago, he'd been stuck in a dead-end job, feeling trapped and invisible. Today, he was a respected member of the community, leading a team of hard-working individuals and making a tangible difference in people's lives. It was surreal and humbling to think that one act of kindness had set this entire chain of events in motion. Still, Jason knew better than to rest on his laurels. Running a business came with its share of challenges, and there were days when the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm him. Supplies occasionally ran short, equipment broke down, and difficult customers tested his patience. But through it all, Jason reminded himself why he'd chosen this path: to create a space where compassion and integrity mattered as much as efficiency and profit. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Word of Jason's innovative approach to management spread beyond the town, catching the attention of regional news outlets. A local reporter visited the store to write a feature article on the Community Support Fund, highlighting how it had helped dozens of families during tough times. The story resonated with readers, sparking an outpouring of support. Donations poured in from neighboring towns, enabling Jason to expand the fund and reach even more people in need. Meanwhile, the fallout from Jason's firing at the old gas station continued to ripple through the community. Many residents were outraged by Mr. Grayson's decision to terminate him over such a small act of kindness. Petitions circulated demanding accountability, and fundraisers were organized to support Jason financially while he transitioned to his new role. Though Jason appreciated the gestures, he chose to focus less on revenge and more on proving that doing the right thing always paid off in the end. By the time the anniversary of that pivotal night rolled around, Jason's life bore little resemblance to what it had been before. He'd gone from being an underappreciated gas station worker to a respected leader with a clear sense of purpose. Yet despite his success, he remained grounded, never forgetting the lessons he'd learned along the way. Compassion, he realized, wasn't just a nice-to-have quality. It was the foundation upon which meaningful change was built. And as he stood behind the counter of his convenience store, watching familiar faces stream in and out, Jason couldn't help but smile. This was more than a job. It was a calling. Little did he know, the best was yet to come. Jason's journey had come full circle. A year after that fateful night at the gas station, he stood behind the counter of his convenience store, now thriving under his leadership. The once empty shelves were now stocked with fresh produce, locally sourced goods and essentials designed to meet the needs of the community. Brightly colored posters advertised upcoming events, a free nutrition workshop for parents, a toy drive for children in need, and a customer appreciation day featuring discounts and giveaways. The store wasn't just surviving, it was flourishing, thanks in large part to Jason's unwavering commitment to compassion and integrity. Every morning as Jason unlocked the doors and flipped on the lights, he felt a deep sense of pride. This place, this bustling hub of activity and connection, was a testament to everything he'd fought for over the past year. It represented not only his personal growth but also the power of choosing kindness, even when it seemed risky or inconvenient. And while there were still challenges, supply shortages, budget constraints, and occasional conflicts among staff, he faced them with resilience, knowing that every obstacle was an opportunity to grow stronger. One sunny afternoon, as Jason restocked the bread aisle, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the arrival of a familiar face. He glanced up and saw Sarah walking in, her 2 children trailing behind her. She looked different now, healthier, happier, and more confident. Her eyes sparkled with gratitude as she approached the counter, clutching a reusable shopping bag filled with groceries. "Jason," she said warmly, smiling as their eyes met, "it's been a while." "It sure has," Jason replied, returning her smile. "How are you doing? How are the kids?" "We're good," Sarah said, her voice steady and strong. "Things have gotten better since that night. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. You have no idea how much it meant to me, and not just because of the groceries. It gave me hope when I needed it most." Jason nodded, touched by her words. "I'm glad to hear that. Honestly, meeting you changed my life too. If it weren't for that moment, I wouldn't be standing here today." Sarah tilted her head curiously. "What do you mean?" "Well," Jason began, leaning casually against the counter. "After that night, I got fired. But an hour later, a man named Richard Langley showed up. He'd heard about what happened and offered me a job managing one of his stores. Long story short, here we are." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious? That's incredible." "It is," Jason admitted with a chuckle. "But it wasn't just luck. It taught me something important. Doing the right thing might cost you in the short term, but it can open doors you never expected." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "Before I forget, I wanted to give you this." She handed it to him, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a handwritten note along with a crisp $20 bill. "What's this for?" Jason asked, confused. "It's payment," Sarah explained softly, "for the groceries I took that night. I know it's late, but I wanted to make things right." Jason shook his head firmly, pushing the envelope back toward her. "No way, keep it. That money wasn't mine to take, it was yours. Besides, I don't need repayment. Seeing you and your kids doing well is all the thanks I need." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes and she hugged the envelope close to her chest. "You're an amazing person, Jason. Don't ever forget that." As Sarah left the store, waving goodbye to Jason and his team, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd both come. Sarah had rebuilt her life, finding stability and strength despite the hardships she'd faced. And Jason? He'd transformed, from a struggling gas station worker into a leader who inspired others to believe in themselves and their ability to make a difference. The ripple effects of that single act of kindness continued to spread throughout the community. Families who had benefited from the Community Support Fund began volunteering at local shelters and food banks, paying forward the help they'd received. Teenagers who worked at the store gained valuable skills and confidence, many going on to pursue higher education or careers they'd once thought were out of reach. Even Mr. Grayson, the manager who had fired Jason, eventually heard about the success of Langley Markets and reached out to apologize. While Jason accepted the apology graciously, he couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that his decision to prioritize compassion over profit had proven its worth. Richard remained a constant source of support and mentorship, often stopping by the store unannounced to check in on Jason and offer guidance. Their relationship evolved from employer-employee to something closer to friendship. Richard frequently praised Jason's leadership style, telling anyone who would listen that Jason was living proof that character mattered more than credentials. "You've exceeded my expectations," Richard told him during one such visit. "Not just in terms of business performance, but in how you've impacted the people around you. You've built something truly special here." Jason smiled humbly, scratching the back of his neck. "I couldn't have done it without your support, or without the lessons I learned along the way. Every challenge, every setback, it taught me something valuable." "That's the mark of a true leader," Richard said with a nod. "Recognizing the value in every experience, good or bad. Keep doing what you're doing, Jason. The world needs more people like you." As the months turned into years, Jason expanded the Community Support Fund to include additional initiatives, such as scholarships for high school seniors and emergency grants for families facing medical crises. He partnered with local schools to host career fairs, encouraging young people to dream big and pursue opportunities beyond the confines of their small town. He even started mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing the wisdom he'd gained through trial and error. Through it all, Jason never lost sight of why he'd started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about fame, fortune, or accolades. It was about making a difference, however small, in the lives of those around him. Whether it was helping a struggling mother feed her children, supporting a teenager's dreams, or simply lending an ear to someone in need, Jason understood that every action mattered. Kindness, he realized, was contagious. One small gesture could inspire countless others, creating a chain reaction of positivity and change. On quiet evenings, as Jason sat in his office reviewing sales reports or brainstorming new ideas, he often thought back to that night at the gas station. He remembered the fear he'd felt when letting Sarah skip the $15 payment, the anger and humiliation of being fired, and the awe of meeting Richard Langley. Each moment had shaped him in ways he couldn't have predicted, guiding him toward a future brighter than anything he'd imagined. And as he gazed out the window at the bustling parking lot, watching customers come and go with smiles on their faces, Jason knew one thing for certain. Life had a funny way of rewarding those who dared to do the right thing, even when it seemed impossible.